Hi, everyone. Welcome to Read, Watch, Listen from the EBPL Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Barnes. Today, we are going to be talking about what Melissa Hozik, our adult programming librarian, is reading, watching, and listening. How's it going, Melissa?
I'm doing okay, Chris. How are you?
Good to hear. Great at the EBPL studios in lovely East Brunswick. You're the adult programming librarian. What exactly do you do for East Brunswick Public Library?
I run programs, concerts, lectures, DIY classes for adults because kids have fun all the time at the library, but adults can too.
What's your favorite program that you've ever done at the library?
I really love doing the DIY classes. In the beginning, I used to do cooking classes as well. It's doing hands-on things, seeing people learn, and have fun and socialize.
And having gone on several library outreach events with Melissa, everyone knows her in town. She does a great job programming. To get back to our podcast today, it's Read, Watch, Listen, and we talk with people in our community about what they've been reading, watching, and listening. This is all stuff that you can find here at East Brunswick Public Library, and our physical collection is a digital download. You want it, we can help you find it. Let's start with the read first. What did you just read?
I read the 13th novel of the Bake Shop Mystery Series by Ellie Alexander, and it's available in print and on eLibrary New Jersey as an ebook. As a lot of staff know, I love food. I love cookbooks. I love recipes. I love talking about food. I like to read about food too.
So what are the Bake Shop Mysteries about? Because that sounds like a very specific subgenre of mystery.
The Bake Shop Mystery Series is a cozy mystery. The first book is called Meet Your Baker. Yes, all the titles are puns. The series follows pastry chef Juliet Capshaw. She was on a cruise ship and her heart is broken by her husband. She goes back home to figure out what she wants to do with her life. She is from Ashland, Oregon, which is the home of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. Her family runs a bake shop business called Tort with artisan coffees and pastries and helps run it with her mom when she comes back. And she reunites with people like her high school love, Thomas. Then she somehow falls into a lot of murders. And she wants to help solve them because she's personally involved with them. She works with her friend Lance, who is the creative director of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And they get themselves in a lot of trouble trying to solve these. Thomas, the high school flame, is the local detective. And eventually she solves most of the mysteries, and they're actually on the 14th novel now. I just read Mocha She Wrote.
Now, I could go for a mocha cake. You can tell we're recording this during lunchtime. So that's good. Now, the watch part, what's something you've been watching recently?
I am watching No Passport Required, a PBS documentary, which you can watch on Hoopla. It follows Chef Marcus Samuelson. You may have recognized him from Food Network. He is a originally New York-based chef. He was born in Ethiopia. He was adopted and raised in Sweden, and he's come here to the U.S. He knows the immigrant experience, knows that things have been especially challenging, whether people's families immigrated decades ago or they're refugees now. He wants to highlight food businesses and tell those stories. The first episode, he's in Detroit and follows the Middle Eastern community. He shares a meal with a Syrian refugee family. He actually has Iraqi falafel that has a different kind of bread. I didn't know this. Now I want it. I don't know if I can find any in the area. If any of our listeners know, please let me. He follows some Lebanese chefs. Some of these people have been for decades, and some are with refugee status. And he tells these inspiring stories. Every episode is a different city, and it makes me hungry.
Obviously, that sounds pretty cool and very tasty. Which one was your favorite episode?
It actually is the Detroit one. I did not know that there is a large Middle Eastern community in Detroit, and it's been for generations. And seeing that and just completely not being aware of it really was an interesting thing to learn about, especially because there is a large Lebanese community here in central New Jersey.
Way to tie it together. And our last question is the listen one. So what have you been listening to?
I actually love podcasts a lot. That's why we helped start the EBPL podcast here. Thank you again, Chris, for helping make that happen.
No problem. And shameless plug, you can find all our great podcasts at anchor.com/EBP Library.
Yes, and on all your favorite podcasting platforms where you're listening to this right now. I'm listening to the 5-Minute Film Finder at the Pioneer Library System, which is based in Oklahoma. They highlight films available on Hoopla and Canopy, and they entice you and encourage you in under 5 minutes to tell you about the movie and get you to want to watch them. And they usually review 2 shows at a time. And sometimes they have a theme, sometimes they don't. They did one that was 80s movies. They did the one that was punk themed. I know that Chris would probably enjoy that one. And so all these are available to you guys as well with your East Brunswick Library card or LMXAC library card, or most public libraries have access to Hoopla and or Canopy, which stream TV shows. Hoopla actually does music and comic books, right, Chris?
Yes, they do.
Documentaries, great courses. Definitely check out 5-Minute Film Finder from the Pioneer Library System. We'll link it in the show notes.
Pretty cool. So on the 5-minute series, what was a discovery that you came across that you were like, oh, this is great. I would have never known about this.
I didn't know about the film Valley Girl, and they did the episode. They had Girls Just Want to Have Fun. And I love 80s movies, but they were films I didn't know about. They do have some of the normal tropes of girl loves boy, boy loves girl, problems ensue. But it has some interesting cultural things that I definitely want to go back and watch.
Well, that sounds good. And I think this is going to wrap it up for Read, Watch, Listen from the EBPL Podcast Network. I'm Chris Barnes. This episode was produced and edited by Melissa Hozik, who is also our guest. Make sure you subscribe to us on your major podcasting platforms or listen at anchor.com/EBP Library. For more information, visit ebpl.org. I'll see you at the library.
Thank you for listening.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast, Read, Watch, Listen. My name is Chris Barnes. I'm from East Brunswick Public Library. Today we have a very special guest. It's Paul Kibala. He is a librarian in our Adult Services Department. So Paul, tell us a little bit about what you do.
I work reference. I help with our ESL programming. I buy the books for the library. That includes ESL, foreign language books, of which we have 7 languages within that. And large print books. I run the book group, the main book group at the library, which is actually starting September 9th and running every second Thursday of the month. And that's through June, I believe. We run for 10 months, second Thursday. The first month, September 9th, we are reading Dear Mrs. Bird. So if anybody's interested, please come by.
I was going to say, I've heard under good authority that you're considered the king of the book discussion group here in East Brunswick. So do you agree with that?
Claudia ran the book group here. Claudia's still here, but she ran the book group for 20 years or so. When I took over, I considered it the ultimate sign of me doing an okay job in that nobody seemed to quit when I took over. Out of all the people that could have quit, nobody did. So that's what a sign of respect. And they probably didn't even intend it to be. It just, I took it to be one, you know?
Oh, yeah. That's the greatest show of flattery, that you've arrived, that it's a seamless transition.
Like in was in Futurama. In Futurama, they say if you do something right, it'll seem like nothing's been done at all. Nobody will notice the difference at all.
Like on Cheers when they switched over to Kirstie Alley.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Seamless transition. Getting back to the podcast, it's called Read, Watch, Listen, and we talk about the media that we've been enjoying. A lot of it you can find here physically at the library, or you can find it in our various ebook services like Hoopla, eLibrary New Jersey, Libby, you name it. So let's start out with this one. What have you been reading lately? Reading. All right. So on Hoopla, I've been to a few national parks, and on Hoopla, I want to plug this specifically about Hoopla because they have this national parks guide. So over the past few years, when I've been to different national parks, I'll check it out. I have the Hoopla app on my phone, and I'll check out every time I go. It's a great resource for updating me on which park I'm in and what there is to do there. So it's a perfect thing for that. I also read The Disaster Artist on there recently. I know the movie came out maybe a few years back, but the book was much better, I thought. And if anybody, have you watched the movie or read the book?
I haven't, but it's on my to-do list of things to watch at some point.
Okay. Well, obviously you know The Room. I guess we should update the people about The Room. If they don't know, it's the tagline is the worst movie ever made. And this is about the making of the worst movie ever made from the viewpoint of one of the lead actors in the movie, and about how hilariously terrible the production was. Not in the sense that it was really awful. It was more a comedy of errors. So witnessing it through his eyes, I mean, as somebody who didn't know what he was getting into, it's hilarious. I must say, a must read. Okay, now my question for
Yeah.
you is now having you seen both the movie and the book version, which one's better, book or movie?
So it's usually going to be the book. In this case, I'd go with the book again. Not too often is it the movie, but when it is, I just feel I never anticipate it being the movie that's better.
Mm-hmm.
But when it is, I always get so happy that it is because I never see it coming. With something like Fight Club or The Godfather or something like that, it's amazing to watch because I don't anticipate it.
Speaking of watching things, what would you recommend for someone to watch?
Hoobot is a great resource. They have this tremendous back catalog where it seems like you're never going to know what's actually on there. I would encourage people who want to watch something on any of these platforms. There's a website called justwatch.com. Plug any show or movie you want into there, and then it'll tell you where you can find it streaming online. So that's what I did recently. I wanted to watch Some Like It Hot, the 1950s comedy with Marilyn Monroe and Jack Lemmon. And it was on Hoopla, and I had no idea it was going to be on there. It's just an amazing movie. It has this pace of a modern film where I find that a lot of older films are kind of a slog, but Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis, I believe, just amazing. Yeah, just amazing comedic actors. There's a joke a minute. It's so funny. If anybody hasn't seen it or hasn't seen it in a while, it's worth revisiting.
I have a theory on those older movies.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So because they were literally putting that on film, and film is really expensive, I think they kept the pacing of movies back then much quicker, whereas now it's all recorded digitally, so they don't care how long something's going to be. Whereas before, they're like, well, if this gag goes an extra 30 seconds, that's a lot of money we're spending. Much money.
You're right.
Yeah, so they just cut it out. That's a great movie. It's a classic one. And I think a lot of those movies don't get enough love in modern times because there's just so much. All right, and last we're going to talk about, what have you been listening to lately?
Oh, I actually didn't have anything that I've been listening to. Yeah, sorry. I have a lot of things I've been watching, though, if we want to hit on more things.
Let's get a bonus watch.
Yeah, bonus watch. I watched Coco recently on Disney+. And a lot of these Disney films, I understand the formula. It's comedy, it's drama, it's music, it's fun for the whole family. And you see it coming a mile away. But for some reason, Coco was just so good. And it was so funny that I did not intend to be moved in that way by a Disney film. And I totally was. And I was laughing out loud during the film, too. So it was amazing.
There's a very interesting, very dark subplot storyline going on that you forget about times. And then when there's a lull in the film, you're like, oh no, there's some pretty heavy stuff going on in this movie.
Exactly. It does it in a way that is so much less in your face than other Disney movies, I guess would be the way to put it, where it's so much better done. It feels like the plotting is so much better. And the whole Day of the Dead cultural aspect and how they incorporate different colors and themes through that is really interesting. So I would definitely recommend that one. It's excellent. Yeah.
That's definitely a good film. That gets 2 thumbs up. It's a great second bonus watch. That's going to wrap us up here on Read, Watch, Listen from the EBPL Podcast Network. Make sure you subscribe. We're on all the major podcasting platforms, or you can listen online at anchor.com/EBP Library. This is produced and edited by Melissa Hozik. And for more information, check us out at ebpl.org. I'm Chris Barnes. Thanks. Welcome, everyone. We're back again on the East Brunswick Public Library Podcast Network. You are listening to Read, Watch, Listen. It is a podcast about what people are getting from the library. And my very special guest today, you've probably seen her around town. She is a super library user. She's also a former member of our library's Board of Trustees, and it's Mary Penn. Mary, thank you for being on the show today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Why do you love East Brunswick so much?
I love East Brunswick because it's so diverse. We moved here because we heard that there was a good school system. And ever since we moved here, we've enjoyed going to the library. I brought my kids there since they were really, really young. We've done the story times. They've grown up and gone through the children's section to the tweens to the teens. And now they're using all different parts of the library in person and also virtual resources. So besides the library, there's so much that East Brunswick has to offer, and it's so diverse here. There's different cultures and different types of foods, and we just love it here. It's really nice. It's a great town.
I can't agree with you anymore. Well said, Mary. So let's get into the podcast. It's Read, Watch, Listen. So we're going to ask you a couple questions about what you've been enjoying. So our first question is, what would you recommend to read?
Wow. So I've actually been reading a lot more at the beginning of this year because we've had so much time at home. I decided that I would read several books a month. So I've read a lot of books, and I'm not going to go through the entire list because it's a long one. But the ones that I really enjoyed that I've been able to get from the library, these two books by Jean Kwok. The first one is called Girl in Translation, and I really enjoyed that one. So I decided to check out her other book, which is called Searching for Sylvie Lee, which is also really good. But I really enjoyed Girl in Translation because I could really relate to it. I love the way that the author had told the story of this young girl living in the US and growing up in an immigrant family. I just love and could relate to that story. And also, I read Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong. That was a really good book. Let's see, what else was I reading? Oh, I really like Crying in H Mart. That's a new book that was written by Michelle Zauner, who also happens to be a musician. She's in a group called Japanese Breakfast. So that was really a lot of fun because I heard about her first because of her music, which I had checked out using Hoopla. But then I heard that she had this book that came out, I think, earlier this year. I was able to relate to her book as well because she told the story about how her mom was diagnosed with cancer and how she was able to become closer to her mom. I related to that because my mom had passed away from cancer about 4 years ago. So that was the first time I really thought about how people grieve in a different way. And it brought up a lot of feelings for me as I read the book. But it was also very helpful to be able to look at it, I guess, in a sort of positive way that she's in a better place now. But those are the books that I really enjoyed this year. There's a common thread between all those books, is that they were all written by Asian American authors. And it was interesting to see all the different ways that they were able to tell the Asian American experience in their storytelling.
Yeah, those are very popular here at the library. They circulate a lot. Make sure you put them on hold. So for the watch part, Mary, what have you been watching?
Really enjoyed Ted Lasso. Actually, my husband got me into watching that. He tried a really, really long time to get me to watch that. I think he watched the entire first season of Ted Lasso. And every time he would sit down and watch it, he would ask me to watch it with him. And I'm like, no, I'm not interested, not into soccer. I found like every excuse there was. So finally, after him being so persistent, I decided I'll just sit down and watch one episode. And then one episode led to another. And it was just really funny. And by the end of that first season, I thought, well, this is kind of a fun show. And because there's so many people who agreed that it was a fun show, it got a second season. And so we're watching that right now. And I just really love how they're developing all the characters. And to me, they're becoming more likable because I came into this, some of the characters weren't very likable, but now I really enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to finishing up season 2. And I also just started watching The Chair with Sandra Oh. I can't tell you much about it because I just watched the first 2 episodes, but it's really engaging, and I can't wait to.
Both of those are very popular. Everyone's talking about it. All our coworkers here at the library, friends. You can't go on my own social media and see someone talking about Ted Lasso or The Chair. So you are on point with what's going on in the entertainment world, Mary. So last but not least, what are you listening to? Now, Mary is a big follower of us on social media, so I'm thinking it might have to do a lot with Bruno Mars, because any Bruno Mars reference that we post on social, Mary is always one of the first people to like that. So what are you listening to, and why is it Bruno Mars?
Oh my goodness, that is so funny that you bring that up because I am listening to something and I've been checking out all the new music using Hoopla. And it's so much fun because I can just have my iPhone with me all the time, whether I'm going out for a run or a walk or running errands if I have to be in the car for a long time. So I'll just listen to something. And the one Bruno Mars related music item that I listen to is Silk Sonic. He partnered with Anderson .Paak to come up with the CD, and it's awesome. It's so much fun to listen to. And because I was listening to that CD, that led me to try out something by Anderson .Paak. And he has a few CDs. So I was able to check out one of those, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy his music. I've also been listening to Olivia Rodrigo Sour, and also I have mentioned Japanese Breakfast. I listened to their CD. Those are my favorite ones.
That's a lot of good listening, and I'm going to have to co-sign on the Anderson .Paak listening. I stumbled across that the last couple years, and oh my God, so much good stuff.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I've listened to it and I really like his voice. I went to see Shang-Chi a couple of weeks ago, and when they're rolling the credits, I was listening to the song. I'm like, who's this? Who is this by? Then when they rolled the credits for the music, they had a song in the soundtrack by Anderson .Paak in Shang-Chi. Oh, so that was a lot of fun.
That's a great fun trivia note. I think that kind of wraps us up. We talked about a lot of stuff today. Mary, thank you as always for being a library supporter, and thank you for being our special guest on the podcast today. And everything we talked about, we can find links in the description notes. You can follow us on anchor.fm/EBP Library for all the East Brunswick Public Library podcasts. I'm Chris Barnes, and special shout out to our producer, Melissa Hozik, for putting this together. And check out our website, www.ebpl.org, for all the latest East Brunswick Public Library services, programs, all the good stuff. Thanks, and we'll check you out later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of Read, Watch, Listen on the East Brunswick Public Library Podcast Network. My name is Chris Barnes. I'm your host. This is our show where we talk about what we are recommending people to read, watch, and listen. Our special guest today is John Arthur. He is the director here at East Brunswick Public Library. John, how are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Oh, good, thank you. John does a lot of the administrative work at the library, but when he's not doing that, you can find him around the building. He does children's concerts. He's done them inside the building, outside the building, all over the library grounds. So, John, why do you like doing children's concerts so much?
Well, it's just fun. I get to play guitar and sing at work, and the kids really, they laugh a lot, they jump around. It keeps the families happy. The parents are usually really happy to join in. So it's a really fun way to engage with the community, and it's a really good educational experience too, because for a 2, 3, 4-year-old, learning to count the strings on the guitar and learning the lyrics to songs, it's a really good way to build those skills that they're going to need in life.
So in your concert set, what is the most kid-friendly song that you play?
Well, obviously they're all kid-friendly. The one I was just talking about, I think goes over really well is I wrote a song about counting the strings on the guitar, and you have to shout out the number of strings throughout the song, and it tends to go over really well. I do these things every week, so you'll have people coming back and they know it from the week before, and they've learned it, and they're ready to go, and they're ready to shout out the numbers when the time comes.
Very cool. Okay, so let's get down to business. This is our recommendation podcast, and let's start out with, John, what have you read that you recommend people check out?
I'm going to break the rules here, but I've got 2 books.
Oh, that's fine.
2 books.
You're the director. We can't say no anyway, so.
Yeah, that's true. The last one I just finished is called The Dead Are Arising, and it's a biography of Malcolm X that just won the Pulitzer Prize by Les Payne and Tamara Payne. It's incredibly well researched. It's a crucial read for anyone who really wants to understand American history. I can see why it won the Pulitzer Prize because it's so in-depth, and having read the autobiography of Malcolm X years ago, it's a good supplement to that book. I've always been a big history person. I studied in undergrad, and most of my classes were 20th century history. So I try to read as much as I can about history in general, but specifically 20th century history. And I'd say this biography is a crucial read if you're interested in the history of our country.
That definitely sounds interesting. Okay, we're going to take it in a different direction now. So, John, what do you recommend people watch?
I finally watched the movie Parasite that won the Academy Award for Best Film, I think 2 or 3 years ago. I liked the director so much that I just started watching all of his movies, and they're all very different. Another one called Snowpiercer is kind of an adventure movie, but it's about class and a class struggle all on a train. They're very conceptual movies, but they're also action movies that are conceptual. It's hard to describe, but so I've gotten really into that work. And most of those films I've seen just in the past 3 or 4 weeks. So that's what I've been watching lately.
No, they're both good choices. I like Snowpiercer because there was a lot going on in that. And so it checked off all the boxes, and Parasite obviously is a good film. So great choices on those. And I can co-sign on those. And last is what have you been listening to?
So I listen to a lot of music. Lately, I've been listening to the band Mono, And I guess they're described as a post-rock band. And I guess what that means is it has elements of rock music, but they very infrequently have vocals. How can I describe it? It's mostly an instrumental band. They use a lot of guitars, but they also use a glockenspiel and a piano. It's really good music to take a walk to, or to exercise to, or to read something to, because there's not a lot of vocals happening, but I find it to be the kind of music that kind of makes me focus. Yeah, so Mono is what I've been listening to lately. They're a band from Japan, and they're similar to other bands that I really like called Explosions in the Sky and other, I guess, what they call post-rock bands.
That sounds good. It's important to have good listening stuff that you like and doesn't distract you, especially in the workplace or when you're doing stuff around the house or even just driving. It's nice having a soundtrack that's not overwhelming.
Yeah, actually, I was writing a grant proposal with Mono playing in the background, and I kind of looked up 45 minutes later, and I just wrote most of this draft in that one 45-minute segment, just plugging away while listening to Mono.
And now, whenever you listen to that album, you're going to think of writing a grant. So see, it's become the soundtrack of your life, John.
It has.
So is there anything else that you think we should check out?
Well, there's a ton. But the other book that I just finished, it's called How to Write One Song, and it's by Jeff Tweedy. He's the songwriter and leader of the band Wilco. It's a really fun book in a lot of ways because it's a guide to writing songs, but it's also a reflection on creativity in general and the creative process with little bits of biography in there. It's a really short book. You can read it in an hour or two. But I've been writing songs my whole life, and I read it and I picked up my guitar and was re-inspired to write. And I would say even if you don't write songs, if you're an artist of any sort, or you write stories or poems, or you're a painter, it still would be an interesting book to read because of the reflections on creativity. And a lot of those lessons can be applied to any creative process that you might be engaged in.
Sounds good. And I think that's a perfect way to end this podcast. John, I'm going to thank you for being our guest today. A special shout out to our producer, Melissa Hozik, who puts this together. You can find this and several other East Brunswick Public Library podcasts on anchor.fm/EBP Library. For East Brunswick Public Library, this is Chris. Thanks for listening, and see you at the library. Hey everybody, welcome back to the East Brunswick Public Library Podcast Network. I'm Chris Barnes. Thank you for listening to another installment of Read, Watch, Listen, where we find out what people in the community they've been enjoying. And you can find most of these at the East Brunswick Public Library. Our guest is Stephane Filippone. She's the Adult Services Manager here at East Brunswick Public Library. Thank you for being on the show, Steph.
Thanks for having me.
Some of the people from the outside of the library, they've seen the work that you and your department have done, but they've never heard of it as an adult services department. So explain what exactly that means to the community.
The Adult Services Department does a little bit of everything. We do all of the collection development for the adult patron. We do programming for the adult patron, and we also process all those books that you see out on the shelves.
So basically everything that comes in and out of the building, this department has their hands on at some point. This is one of the reasons we thought that you would be the perfect guest for this podcast, because literally you see every book, movie, piece of music that comes in and out of our doors. So the first question is, Stephanie, what have you been reading recently?
What I've been reading is a book called Mrs. March by Virginia Fato. She's actually a debut novelist. It's about this woman whose husband publishes a novel who features a character that kind of looks very similar to this woman, his wife. She's actually really disturbed by this characterization, and she thinks that it's a very unflattering depiction of herself. She goes snooping in her husband's office and finds a newspaper clipping about this woman who's recently been murdered. And she now has it in her head that her husband has killed this woman. Really, it's a deep dive into this woman who's a very unreliable narrator. And we're trying to figure out if the things that she's actually experiencing are happening to her or if it's all just in her head.
That actually sounds pretty unique, and especially for a debut novelist to be taking something with such a unique approach. Now, do you think this is something that would get adapted for a book or a movie?
Funny that you mentioned that, Chris, because it's actually being turned into a movie. And Elizabeth Moss is going to star as Mrs. March. People know that Elizabeth Moss is the main character in The Handmaid's Tale. And actually, the really interesting part is Virginia Filippone, who is the author, she's actually going to be writing the screenplay as well. So it'll be really interesting to see the similarities and differences between the book and the movie.
I can't think of a lot of movie adaptations where the author gets to write the screenplay. That's pretty cool. Hopefully I'll get a chance to read the book before it comes to the movie screens. The next part of our show is something that if you walk around the water cooler here at East Brunswick Public Library, Stephanie and I are always talking about what we watched on television. Stephanie, what have you been watching these days?
I have to really put in the plug for a show called Below Deck. It's on Bravo, which if you check out one of our Roku kits from the Makerspace, you'll be able to watch Bravo. Below Deck is a show about luxury yachts and the charter guests who stay on these yachts for a couple days on their vacation. It really takes a deep dive into the personal lives of the deck crew and the inside interior staff, which is called the chief stew and the stewardesses.
That sounds like a unique premise for a show because, number one, who has a luxury yacht that they go on vacations with? And second of all, the people who have to run these for all these eccentric billionaires, their stories must be amazing.
It really is. I mean, to be able to see all of these really exotic places, they've gone to the Mediterranean, they've gone to Greece, Croatia, the Caribbean, and definitely during the pandemic when we're not able to be traveling, it's really great to see all of these really cool, exciting places that hopefully one day I'll get to visit in person.
Yes, all the cool places that you could be at instead of being stuck inside your house during a pandemic. That's
Exactly.
The perfect show for the last year. So the final part of this is, what have you been listening to lately?
I have been listening to an audiobook on Libby. It's called My Not So Perfect Life by Sophie Kinsella. She's actually the author who writes the Shopaholic series. And as you know, I have a very long commute, both to and from work. So I take this time to really escape into an audiobook, and it's very light, it's fun, it's a little bit of a romance and some hijinks. It's about this girl. She's 20-something, she's lives on a farm, but she dreams about going to London to live and to work. So she is able to, and she gets this dream job in branding. But unfortunately, she's this data analyst who doesn't really get to do any of the cool stuff. She tries to show her perfect life in Instagram, which is really not the case because she obviously lives with roommates who are weird and she has this terrible commute. And she just really wants people to think that her life is so much better than what it is. But unfortunately, she gets fired from her job and has to move back home. And there's a lot of hijinks because her dad's trying to start this glamping business. And lo and behold, her ex-boss actually comes for vacation to her dad's country farm. Now she's trying to figure out how to get around this so that the ex-boss doesn't recognize her. There's a lot of comedy of errors that happens. And it really is just a great listen.
That does sound entertaining. And speaking of adaptations, that's something that I'd like to see a 7-picture sitcom run on. So good recommendations all around. All right, Stephanie, thank you for being on this week's episode of Read, Watch, Listen. I'd like to give a shout out to our producer, Melissa Hozik, for putting this together. You can listen to this and other great podcasts from East Brunswick Public Library online at anchor.fm/EBP Library. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for listening, and see you all at the library. Thanks.
Thanks so much.